it's a really great pleasure to be here, and I'm always very excited to talk about dermoscopy because, after all, it's my favourite topic. I've just come back from Vienna, so nice to see someone from Austria. Now, Vienna would be one of the centres of dermoscopy in the world, and 1,200 people from all over the world congregated in Vienna to attend the World Congress, including 5 from New Zealand. I think the other 4 must have been GPs, I think. I only met 2 of others. They were both GPs. And there's many from Australia, many from all over Europe, the United States, South America, and a few from Asia. So this workshop is not intended to make you an expert, and it does expect you, when evaluating a patient who presents with a lesion of concern, for you to do a skin examination of the entire body. To remind you, if you're a bit shaky on skin examination, Dr. Paul Jarrett, who's a dermatologist in Auckland, has done a nice video on how to examine the skin. This isn't really intended for the patient, but in general practice, we really need to be teaching our patients how to examine their own skin. So we know that half of the melanomas diagnosed are in fact diagnosed either by the patient or one of their relatives. According to the literature, our data in New Zealand would suggest it's about a third. So teach them how to examine their own skin. The workshop will start with a pre-test, an introduction to dermoscopy, clinical features of pigmented skin lesions, dermatoscopy of pigmented skin lesions, and interactive exercises. Now, there's not necessarily going to be any order to those things, so although you do have an agenda, because one has to have an agenda, it won't necessarily stick to it. And I do promise you will stop for morning tea and lunch, but somebody might have to remind me of that, because I tend to go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. It's all such fun, you know. So one of the things in Vienna that was discussed, somebody gave a lovely presentation and they talked about dermatologist incomes. And it seems that you can make most income out of Botox injections. Well, most dermatologists don't do those here because we're too busy rushing after melanomas, and they're done by other health practitioners, but by dermatologists are probably the biggest users of Botox. But dermoscopy, unfortunately, resulted in the least income. So bear that in mind. So the second slide was about the enjoyment of one's career. And in this case, Botox was the bottom, and dermatoscopy was the top. Everybody there had such fun. We know that it's really good fun. So why are we here? Well, we're here because the ministry has got tumour streams, and melanoma is one of those tumour streams that's being evaluated to ensure that people throughout New Zealand have equitable access to expertise. And the standard, which is a provisional standard at this point, says a number of things that are important in terms of diagnosis and management of melanoma. And it says that patients will have access to a primary care physician who can examine their skin and has been trained in the recognition of skin cancers, particularly melanoma. And they also can have access equitably throughout the country to doctors with expertise in dermatoscopy. So it's all there, among a number of other things that are worth bearing in mind. Now, of course, the examination of many of our patients isn't that easy. If they've got lots and lots of spots like this gentleman, we've got X marks a spot because it's the biggest lesion, but it isn't necessarily the melanoma. And we do have to examine the whole patient to determine which lesions necessitate further evaluation. So let's start with some dermoscopy images. I'm not going to give you any history, and I'm not going to give you any clinical pictures, simply 10 seconds per case. I'm going to make it really easy for you by giving you the options for diagnosis. And the options are the same in all cases. So the option A is melanocytic nevus, option B is melanoma, option C is seborrheic keratosis, and D is basal cell carcinoma. And I really don't know how to do this without turning the lights off, but then you're not going to be able to see to write. So I don't know how we're going to achieve this. We'll have the lights on, I think, since you've got to write. And this is only an exercise after all, starting from now. You have 10 seconds for the first case. Case 2. Case 3. Case 4. Case 5. Six. 7. 8. 9. 10. That's all over. Well, that was easy, wasn't it? Okay, those of you who couldn't see, would you like to rearrange the tables and chairs? Or can you all see all right? Any problems at the back there? Fine. Okie doke. So dermatoscopy, what is it? Just to keep you on your toes, I'm going to make sure that you participate fully in this entertaining workshop. Well, it's entertaining for me anyway. Could you please all hold up a white card and an orange card? And those of you who are challenged may notice that that means turning them over. Now, I'm not seeing 2 cards in everybody's hand, please. We're going to have to do this a lot. 2 cards in everybody's hands, please. Okay, fantastic. So option A is usually going to be white, and option B is usually going to be orange. So we're going to have an exercise here. The question is, who has their own dermatoscope? Please hold up the correct card. Very good. We've got about half and half. People have their own dermatoscope. Fabulous. Okay, so what is dermoscopy? Well, it's got lots of names. Bruce suggested 2 of them, but there's a list of about 8 names, but dermatoscopy and dermoscopy are the most common. Epiluminescent microscopy is a bit of a mouthful, for example. But basically, we're talking about skin examination using magnification, a good light, and some means to reduce surface reflection. So you can reduce surface reflection either by using a contact film, some fluid of some kind, trying to avoid bubbles, or you can use a polarizing filter, or both. And we know that dermatoscopy increases the diagnosis of pigmented lesions in expert hands. There's a little bit less certainty of the use of dermoscopy in less expert hands. But there are a number of clinical trials that have proved this. And yet, I open a latest journal saying that you're better seeing somebody face to face than you are looking at pictures. Well, of course, it depends who's looking at the pictures. And if you don't have training, then you're going to be no good at it. So why should we magnify? Well, if you have a modern passport, you may notice that there's a little line that looks like a chain around your neck. And the close-up of the chain is, in fact, New Zealand script. So why reduce surface reflection? Well, this very same passport is a demonstration how you thought it just had date and place of birth and so on. but actually it's got a kiwi in the background. And you only know that if you have a polarized light with which to look at it. So there are lots of different types of dermatoscopes, and this is not the time or place to decide which is best. And many of you may have one that I think is not terribly useful, but they're very expensive and you'll probably stick to what you've got. And new dermatoscopes are being produced all the time. Okay, just to remind you, we have option 1, which is hold up the white card, option 2, that is hold up the orange card, but I'm now bringing in a little bit more complexity. Option 3 is hold up both cards. And option 4 is none of the options are right. Now, for none of the options are right, I need a firm crossed arms. Otherwise, we'll be waiting for hours and hours and hours while people are trying to make their minds up. Okay, so for those of you who have a dermatoscope or don't, you will need to answer this question. My dermatoscope is A, polarized, that's the white card, or B, unpolarized, which is the orange card, or both, which is both cards, or neither, because you haven't got a card, which is like this. And if you don't know, you can go like this. Okay, so a lot of you have both, or neither, or one, or the other, and a few don't know. Fair enough. So which dermatoscope should you buy? Well, this depends on your budget. You can pay anything from around $100 coming out in July, not yet available, to $2,000, $3,000, and you get a better lens and a bigger image. And you can have a video type dermatoscope, or you can have a still image dermatoscope. Most of us have the stills because they're more convenient. But the videos, you can get up to times 100 magnification and in focus, which is fairly incredible. But let's assume that you have a still type handheld dermatoscope. So you could have polarized or unpolarized or both. Both is best. You could have contact or non-contact or both. Both is best. Lens size and quality, best, the more you pay, the better you get. Portability is important if you're in more than one room, but it may not matter if you're always consulting in the same room. The convenience of charging in a dock or plugged into your computer or straight into the power, or batteries, of course. And one of the absolutely most important things if you're going out to buy a new dermatoscope is whether you can attach some form of camera to it. And these people, Esteem Healthcare, do provide you with discount should you be wanting to purchase after this workshop. So a non-contact device. This is a dermatoscope. It might look a bit bigger than most of you are familiar with, but it is a dermatoscope. It is ×2, and it's polarized, and it has a light. And it's very useful for rapid examination of the entire skin surface. It's really good for getting those shadowed places you can't see in your examination room. It also looks impressive. And that's polarized. Contact devices require you to be in contact with the skin. For example, this one is a non-contact device as it is, but it becomes a contact device when you pull out the spacer. But in order to get a good image without polarization, you need fluid. And in fact, the best image is polarization and fluid. So if you have a contact device such as the Heine and the Episcope, fabulous pictures, but unfortunately you've got to use fluid, and that has the disadvantage that you have to remove the fluid and you have to clean the lens between every single spot you look at, which means you only look at one spot usually, or it just stays on the table. So why would we do both? Could we just switch the light off for this picture, thanks? So you can see that these are both taken contact with fluid, but one is polarized and the other is polarized, and you see different things. The top lesion is a melanoma, and this is a benign lesion, and we observe that the benign lesion has a bubble on top. So this is a bit fuzzy. It's not because it's out of focus. It is perfectly focused, but it is biologically fuzzy because it's got a blister on top and it's swollen up. Okay, it lights back on again. You're going to be up and down quite a lot, so in fact, it'll become automatic. As soon as I show a dermoscopy picture. Thank you. So if you have a non-contact dermoscopy device, it's really quick and easy. You just scan your whole patient, having a quick look. But it takes a while to snap into focus. And each device is at a focus point slightly different from another. And if it's the lesion scaly, you're still going to need to put fluid on it to get rid of the interface, which between the skin has scale on it. You can't see what's underneath, but if you put fluid on, often you can. But on the other hand, if you've got a contact dermatoscope, you get lovely, lovely pictures, but it's tedious. So I like a hybrid. This is a hybrid dermatoscope. Not that one. That looks as if it's a hybrid. But it isn't. This one's the hybrid. They look the same, but they're different. So this has both polarized and polarized. It has both contact and non-contact. So if anybody gets my opinion as to which one they should buy, this is probably going to be the one. This does the same, but it's more expensive and slightly better lens. And so we need to be able to take photographs, because if you don't take photographs, you're just not going to learn, and you're not going to be able to comply with the standards. Now, the standards for the provision of care in patients with melanoma of the Ministry of Health states that photography is useful, and that the new high suspicion of cancer, which we'll be talking about in a minute, also suggests that you take photographs, particularly dermoscopic photographs, and that macro photographs are going to be mandatory, or we hope they will be, for any referral under high suspicion of cancer. So, most people these days have a smartphone, and that's the easy way to achieve it. So to take a photograph, you don't need a smartphone. You need some form of camera, some form of dermatoscope, and some way of attaching the two together, because just holding them is a little bit clumsy and tricky. Then you have to have figured out how you're going to archive them, whether they're in the individual patient's notes or whether they're independent of the notes but securely archived so that your privacy and so on isn't compromised. And you need some form of software for sharing the images, and increasingly that comes with the camera. So which camera? Well, you could do what I did, is buy one of these 4/5 systems, because I thought an SLI was getting a bit too heavy, but actually this is too heavy, and once you put the dermatoscope on the end, it's really, really difficult to take good pictures. And you're much better off with an iPhone, to be honest, or some form of smartphone. So you can buy specific devices that go onto your smartphone, or you can buy an adapter. So for example, what I've done here is I've joined the carrier that goes on an iPhone 6. Here's my dermatoscope, the magnetic connection onto the cell phone. So I just have to turn the dermatoscope on and take a photo. All very easy, 2-second job. Take a macro first. This is the device I mentioned that's going to come out at $100 later this year. It's a young lady from Canada who's invented this, and it's going to snap onto any smartphone, and it's a mini dermatoscope. I have only seen a prototype so far, so it remains to be seen whether I'll be recommending it or not. One of the problems with using a smartphone is people tend to leave their phones around, and you can easily, if you know how, corrupt or get into phones, or you could even find your phone and delete its contents when you have lost it, and then you've lost your pictures too. So this is a very nice software called PicSafe.com, which was developed by a dermatologist in Melbourne. And PicSafe enables safe teledermatoscopy, and I have it, if anybody wants to look at the program, I have it on my phone. But basically what it is, you take a picture within PicSafe, you hand your machine to your patient and say, sign consent here, please, and they sign on it, and then you put their ID in, and that's just scanned. You just whiz on the barcode, and then you press go, and off it goes into the cloud, and it arrives in your inbox as a PDF. That's the free version. There's various different versions. So this is one example that I took for this purpose. This is a lady with a suspicious lesion on her back. So I've used my cell phone to take a picture of her back, to take a picture of her lesion, and a dermoscopy photograph as well. She signed consent, and it arrived in my inbox a few minutes later and off my phone. Okay, so other photographic options, you can get somebody else to take your photographs for you. Maybe somebody else in the practice. That might be a practice nurse, it might be a Dermoscopy center, or you might use one of these fancy cameras which we have in our department, which is with the same camera you can take macro and dermoscopic views, and they all work. It's rather expensive. So you need a dermatoscope, you need a camera, you need some means of putting them together, you need training. So training is mostly practice, 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 practice. So today I'm just going to really give you some clues as to what you're looking for. There are other courses available, free and paid for, and there are loads of books. But if you're going to learn, you have to take photos. So training, the best training is the Skin Cancer Australasia Certificate and Diploma, or the International Diploma, which is based in Graz. But they're basically mostly online courses, and they're very, very expensive and very, very good. The iTunes App Store has quite a few apps on dermoscopy. This was about 6 months ago, and they've ranged from free to $119. And this is a nice one, Virtual Dermatoscope, which very nicely goes through the characteristics of different skin lesions. Dermoscopy should be used all the time. It's not something that gets pulled out of the drawer once a week. If you're going to become familiar with dermoscopy, it does require being in your hand when you're taking listening to somebody's chest. It needs to be beside you so you can lift up the dermatoscope and check their moles at the same time. We use it predominantly for pigmented lesions, but with a little more training and experience, it can be used just as easy for non-pigmented lesions. And dermatologists use dermoscopy for inflammatory dermatoses. One of the most useful uses is scabies. Okay. Just to remind you, you have 2 cards. Can we turn the light up, please? Hold up the card you think is correct. Which of these 2 is scabies? Okay, we've got some people holding their cup, and some are too shy. Just hold anything up. Okay, we can't move on until something's held up. Okay, so most people think it's the white one. That's A, and a few people are wondering if it's the B one. Okay, thank you. And the answer is? It was the B, hang on. The answer will come later. So then we get the dermatoscope out and we're thinking, which of these is scabies? Because we're now seeing different things with a dermatoscope than we saw face to face. And we're getting whites coming up for everybody. That's great. Because indeed, what we're seeing here is a burrow, and that is a mite. So let's go back to the previous one. This is a solar keratosis. So we may be looking in the same location, and very often our patients with scabies are elderly, so they do have actinic keratosis, so they have scaly things on the back of their hands. If we're looking for a burrow, it may be on the back of the hands, it may be between the digits, it may be on the wrists, but it's a scaly spot and may look and feel rather like an actinic keratosis. But on dermoscopy, they're quite different. So a solar keratosis is a roundish, not completely round, scaly spot, and a burrow is a long white scaly line with a grey triangle at the end, and that triangle is variously called a jet plane or a hang glider, depending on what you see. So the scabies is alive as well, and well, as most of you know who are in general practice at least. And what happens is the patient comes to see you and says, well, I saw Dr. So-and-so a couple of weeks ago and he said I had scabies and I did what he told me and it didn't work at all. And this is a common scenario you'll all be familiar with. And you look at the patient's hands and you think to yourself, well, it looks like scabies to me. But you become uncertain because the patient has already been treated. And so knowing to look for burrows with live mites is very helpful. So of course that patient may have been adequately treated but has come back to you too soon, he's still itchy, in which case you may see old burrows but you won't see the triangle at the end because that's not there anymore. And you may see live mites or you may not, in which case you may examine the whole patient and say, well, I think you've got a touch of dermatitis. Of course dermatitis can be triggered by scabies, so we have to remember that. Okay, so wiggly line with a female mite at the end. But we're not going to deal with inflammatory dermatoses and infestations anymore. We're going to talk about skin lesions for the rest of the day.